Hello and welcome everyone. This is the first webinar in the Trailblazer 3.0 series, and today we're going to be looking at old habits, new routines, health, safety and well-being protocols. So some key areas that we're going to be touching on today include customer expectations around cleanliness and how to rebuild confidence, as well as who's responsible for the duty of care in 2021. And this is all with a view to ensure a safe reopening of business and the ability to remain open. So we are super excited to be launching the Urban Living Festival this summer on the 7th and 8th of July at Tobacco Dock in London. And this event was brought together as a result of how the different hospitality and real estate asset classes are blurring, which has only been accelerated over the past 12 months. And this event is set around 3 stages called Stay, Live and Work. And if you want to read more, a link to the ULF website has been posted in the chat. A few housekeeping rules before we begin. We're going to spend around 45 minutes today chatting with our Trailblazers, who aside from myself will be the only ones to have their cameras and microphones on. We are going to spend some time at the end to take any questions from the floor, so please do submit these using the Q&A function. I'll keep my beady eyes on the chat and we'll get round to these at the end. And the webinar is being recorded, so everyone that has registered will receive a copy within 48 hours. I'm Eloise Hanson. I am the news editor at Boutique Hotel News. So we are an online B2B multimedia platform for boutique, lifestyle and luxury hotels. And we have 2 other sites called Service Department News and Short-Term Rentals, all of which are published by International Hospitality Media, host of the Urban Living Festival. So let's meet our Trailblazers, and I'm going to ask each of our speakers to introduce themselves, and I'm going to move from left to right on my screen, which means that I am going to begin with Amanda. Please, over to you.
Thank you, Eloise. Thank you very much. Happy to be here. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. As Eloise said, I'm Amanda Frasier. I am the Executive Vice President of Standards and Ratings for Forbes Travel Guide. Forbes Travel Guide, formerly Mobile Travel Guide, originated the 5-star rating system in the United States. We've since taken our system globally, and I oversee the creation and refinement and ongoing evolution of our standards that we use to evaluate the hotels and restaurants and spas on our list, and the rating system as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda. And Gordon, I'm coming to you next, please.
Thank you, Elise. It's a pleasure to be here with you all today. As Eloise said, my name is Gordon Bruce. I'm Director of Room to Breathe. And we create safer, healthier indoor environments. Launched before COVID, so this is not just for COVID. We deal with all indoor contaminants. And that's not just for bedrooms, but it's also for your staff areas, event spaces, and we can allow you just to get back to normal and do away with all these extra cleaning protocols. Yeah, we're the future.
Thanks so much, Gordon. And I'm coming to Deborah next, please.
Hello, everybody. Delighted to be here. My name's Deborah Heather. I'm Managing Director of Quality and Tourism. We're a third-party accreditation body working internationally, and we have developed standards called Safe, Clean and Legal, which is a sort of an underlying health and safety scheme, alongside REST, which is Responsible, Ethical and Sustainable Tourism, and wellbeing, which is a wellbeing and mental health scheme focused on staff training. And we've also modernised our ratings across the UK and internationally.
Thanks, Deborah. And last but not least, Paul.
Hi, I'm Paul Callingham with Starboard Hotels. We own and operate a portfolio of 21 different hotels under various brands. We have 9 Ibis hotels, 5 Holiday Inn Expresses, a Holiday Inn. We have a Hampton by Hilton, a Best Western, a Days Inn, and I think 3 independent hotels, mainly leisure driven. In addition to that, we own and operate 29 quick service and delivery restaurants under the Pizza Hut brand and the Walk to Walk brand, employing over 900 people across the group. Our head office is based in Beaconsfield in the UK and in Chorley in Lancashire, and that's us.
Brilliant. Thanks, Paul, and thanks to our Trailblazers. So everyone's LinkedIn profile has been posted into the chat, and I encourage you all to connect with everyone, essentially. But before we get started, I am going to run through some few context slides, as I think it's always helpful before we get started into our main conversation. So the first that I want to highlight is this TripAdvisor Consumer Sentiment Survey at the top here. This was conducted last year, and at the time, 92% believe that cleanliness is the most important factor when deciding where to stay, and 84% say that certifications are an important consideration. 79% also wanted to see compliance to government safety standards on display, and we are now, of course, 1 year on. So to what extent these statements hold true in the current environment is something that we are going to discuss today. On the next slide, we can see a couple of examples of how some companies adjusted very quickly to these changes in consumer behavior / sentiment. So we've had many hotel groups like SLH on your screens partnering with advisors or suppliers to enhance operating procedures and obtain some form of accreditation. And we've even got TripAdvisor as well, who unveiled a whole new suite of features that made it easier for travelers to search, filter, and identify safe COVID compliant properties. And finally, on the last slide, I've been highlighting so far stories around cleanliness and safety, but I want to bring in health and well-being into the conversation, and especially staff. They too are probably going to need some reassurance and maybe even confidence to return back to work. And one example that I've seen, and I'm sure there are others out there, is what the Mandrake is doing for its staff. They've put on a month-long staff well-being program in the run-up to the hotel's opening, explaining that their team is their most valuable asset and therefore should be given the same level of care as their guests. So as I mentioned, this is all really background information to help frame our conversation today. So let's get started. And I am going to be coming to Deborah first. And I really am jumping straight in here by asking, what preventative measures should hoteliers be taking to ensure a safe reopening?
They need to be looking at their customer journey. So what we'd always advise is a risk assessment based around the customer journey, step by step, including all the touch points that the staff get involved in. So wherever staff are affected, and basically they've got to do that, and whilst being mindful of enhancing the customer experience. So it's a really difficult balance. I mean, not only are we going, big style into new measures and really trying to embed new cultures, they also have to try and take the customer and the staff on that journey with them. It's an interesting one.
That balance, I've been quite fascinated to see the balance between the sort of high tech, high touch, particularly when you get into the upper upscale luxury hotels, as to how do you strike that balance. It's one thing to sort of preempt the friction points and altogether remove them, but is luxury all about giving people that option? And in terms of the safety precautions, all these different measures, who is responsible for checking the consistency of standards?
So I believe that we're going to see a whole different sort of hierarchy in terms of hotels. I think the job's got harder and harder. I used to be a hotel manager, so everybody has my empathy out there. But actually, we've moved slightly. We moved into the commercial world. We moved into the whole the responsibility of the GM being the person that's driving that commercial side of things. We actually may need to step back a couple of generations. We've gone past domestic cleans a few years ago, well, probably 20 years ago, because we've had norovirus and things like that around us for the last 20 years. But actually, it's this compliance bit. And I wonder whether general managers are going to end up back on the floor, or is there going to be this sort of super exec housekeeping role that's very health and safety orientated? It includes training, or maybe it's an all-encompassing ops. But we certainly need to go back to supporting and holding the hands of the teams that have to deliver this, because they have to understand for their own safety and that of their guests. They have to understand exactly the differences, and it's a change of operating model in lots of ways. So it's really quite a tough ask for all our hoteliers out there.
Just from my own conversations, I understand that many, be it general managers, C-suite, or even, you know, hotel team and staff, they've all had to chip in. They've all had to take on extra roles, extra responsibilities. So whether that will evolve into this whole new hierarchy, in one of my previous webinars, we touched on this idea that perhaps we will see a chief health officer be introduced, and whether they are going to be responsible for looking after your staff and the well-being of your staff, but also the well-being of your guests too. And Deborah, there's this versus between responsibility and accountability, right? So where would you say the accountability lies?
It's a really interesting one, isn't it? The rules of negligence means the owner or the general manager. Who would the SHE prosecute if there was an issue, and it will be the person that's at the top of the tree. So it's an awful lot of pressure for hoteliers.
Goodness. So let's move the conversation on to start looking at healthy environments, right? This is all about creating that safe, healthy environment for when we get back to work. And Gordon, when we first talked in preparation for this webinar, there was some certain scientific data and stats that completely shocked me. So when it comes to these kinds of spaces, would you agree that there's a gap in our knowledge of safe, healthy environments? And if so, what is it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a massive gap in just awareness and education required. And I don't want this to become a science lesson to some extent, but we've all been aware of influenzas and noroviruses and these types of things for many, many years. It just so happens that the world is a lot smaller now. We travel quicker, we get around quicker, and it's how we, first of all, make the staff feel comfortable by making them aware and educating them. Educating the traveller and educating the hotel owners. There really is, there's a big gap, and you can see that with all the different methods that many different, not just hotels, hospitality, office blocks, schools, hospitals. We're involved in all these areas trying to advise them on infection prevention with some of the tools that we have. But it would surprise you even in hospital environments that they don't understand infection prevention. So to expect hotel owners or operators to understand this and only be getting their information from the TV, from the loudest, biggest, emptiest vessels out there, the chemical companies that tie up companies with agreements, it's all rather misleading, and unfortunately the traveller or the members of the public don't quite know what to do or what to expect. And I think I'm getting involved in quite a lot of questions and answers here. Clearly, we believe we've got the best solutions available, which I can hope to deliver to some people. But really, yeah, education awareness is a massive part of this. And once you have that, you can actually relax a bit more. And to Deborah's point about the HSE and who's to blame, as long as you can show that you've done the best that you can, then you should be okay. But are you doing the best you can is where we help.
And how would a hotelier ensure that peace of mind, not only for their guests, but for their staff too, from your perspective?
from my perspective, is different from what everyone else can easily achieve. From my perspective, we protect both surfaces and air continuously. But again, it's from awareness. You know, if they can be aware of what they should and shouldn't do, and make sure they carry that out to the best of their ability, then they should be okay. It's really just about education, to be honest, and cleaning protocols, and understand how to use even the chemicals they have. You know, even the chemicals that we've used for many years are not being used properly. So is there really a point to using them? You know, these types of things, education, awareness, it's something I'll always come back to.
There's been great efforts recently just around training programs, be that just training to sort of reopen. But if you could expand that, I know I've worked in hotels and I've undergone many different courses and modules, be it specific to that hotel or as part of a brand. But
I don't want to get involved too deeply in criticism, but you know, if you take any sort of cleaning product that's under the kitchen shelf or in any store cupboard, you know, read the labels. It's anything between 3 to 5 minutes, even 10 minutes dwell time and contact time. So first of all, we're using chemicals which are not good for housekeeping. We're storing chemicals which are not good for the environment, and we're actually using stronger and more chemicals to try and deal with this pandemic, which is wrong, simply.
Well, I guess we've all got a big learning curve to all go through still. We think we've learned a lot in the last year, but I guess we're all just continuously evolving and on the lookout for new solutions. And speaking of solutions and offering guidance, Amanda, I understand Forbes Travel Guide has recently published a back to work best practices guide. And from your conversations, I kind of touched on it earlier, is there a common area of concern for luxury hotels specifically?
Thank you, Eloise. You know, it's interesting. This is such a great conversation. We could be here all day, couldn't we, talking about this? But, you know, just to answer your question and to dovetail off what Deborah said, you know, at the end of the day, yes, we deal with luxury and we're writing standards for the luxury consumer, for the hotels. You know, one of the biggest conversations that we've been having and why we really put those best practices out is the staff are they're trying to do more with less and continue to try to do more with less, but also they have all these new rules, regulations, restrictions, which also differ country to country, you know, and here in the US, state to state, and then sometimes county to county. So there's so much for them to absorb. And at the same time, in the luxury sector, they're also trying to maintain a level of very high dedicated luxury service. So it presents another challenge. You know, and our best practices cover some of the conversations that we have regularly, such as, okay, I have to do more with less, and now I have to do this, this, and this, and I have to take this, perhaps this service has to change completely. I mean, I think in-room dining has been the biggest conversation we've had with hotels and continue to have, you know, because it runs the gamut. There are hotels that never closed and never stopped serving in-room dining. And then you have those that had to pull everything out based on, you know, whatever their governing regulations were. You know, our conversations really, because of what we do as a company and our focus and our standards are written from the consumer experience, the guest experience side, our conversations really focused on, okay, if you have to make sure all the food is covered, then, or you have to offer the option to drop the food at the door, what does it look like when the guest opens their in-room dining, opens their door and sees their in-room dining cart or tray? Is it easy for them to pick up and bring into the room? Are they going to be, you know, bumping through over the threshold? Are they going to end up spilling everything? So, you know, we did adjust our standards and refine them so that these flexibilities were there, so that we weren't unfairly penalizing hotels. You know, as we continue to assess them this year, we paused last year, but, you know, as we continue to assess those that are open this year, we want to be fair and flexible, but at the same time, we're helping hotels understand it's fine to follow all these regulations. You have to, it's encouraged. We need to do that, but don't forget about the end user experience. So just make sure that everything has been tested from a guest experience standpoint.
I'm wondering if you could perhaps expand on, I know you just mentioned that you refined some of your standards, but could we also expand on that? Have you introduced any new ones at all completely as a result of what's happened over the past year?
You know, we saw very early on, March, April last year, that there was going to be a bigger focus than ever on wellness and your health and how you feel during a trip and after your trip. And, you know, although our best practices were designed obviously to help with the existing requirements and to navigate them, we knew as we began to refine the standards for the following year, which at the time was going to be for 2021, even though we were looking at which of those changes would possibly be temporary versus here to stay. One of the biggest changes we made was to introduce a complete set of wellness standards. Now, wellness isn't new, it's not a new trend, and we've had standards for many years looking at the quality of the food and the variety of healthy options on menus. That's always been there. But what we did is we converted several standards that we already had, and we created new standards in collaboration with our Standard Advisory Committee, because we knew and know, and everyone knows, that wellness is not just about having a great choice of a couple of salads on your menu. That's not going to cut it. And wellness isn't restricted to the spa and having great menu options in the spa and you get a massage and you feel great for 20 minutes afterwards. But it's about the whole lifestyle. We have standards now that look at quality of sleep, noise, quality of water, availability of water. And we're also looking to see, you know, what are the hotels doing to make that wellness lifestyle choice easily accessible, and in our case, in a luxurious way as well. These things obviously have to be high quality and well thought out and well planned, and really that's something that we're looking at very closely now. In fact, just to add, Eloise, as well, just because of the way we evaluate hotels and compose our scoring system, for the first time since we, you know, have created our standards in the longest time, we actually have also made wellness a high impact classification, which for us within our algorithm means if you do well in your wellness standards, you have the ability to elevate your property in our system, whether that be at the recommended 4 or 5 star level. And just back to the earlier point as well, we made cleanliness and condition a high impact standard, whereas pre-COVID, that was always important. And we have lots of cleanliness and condition standards, but now we've put an extra emphasis on it because that's what's important to the consumer.
Mm-hmm. The fact that I'm now curious, the fact that it's now weighted slightly differently now, do you reckon that is like a long-term view in that it will now perhaps stay like that for a while? Or do you reckon once this is all past and we're kind of over COVID and we're, you know, there's this argument that we have short time spans, but we'll just almost revert back to those old ways and old norms. But do you see this as you know, like a long view with the waiting?
We do. We see that, you know, I think attitudes have changed and we're more educated as guests, and hotels are more educated, and who wouldn't want to be healthier? So I think we're going to see it evolve more, just as we've seen luxury evolve over the years and change and shift every, you know, 5 to 6 years. There's always a shift in what luxury is. And I think our approach to wellness and well-being and what it means to have a clean hotel and how you achieve that is going to change and continue to change.
Thanks, Amanda. And I'd like to come to Paul next, please. You highlighted in your introduction, Paul, that you manage a portfolio of 21 hotels, which obviously includes a range of branded and independent. What has been your experience and what have you learned during that process?
And so we borrow with pride, I think, is what we learn, is that we try and take the best elements from the different brands, whatever it's regarding safety standards or regarding cleanliness or whether it's regarding guest experience, and we try and implement that wherever we can. And so we have our own standards in addition to the brand standards. Cleanliness wise, different brands have got different ways of letting their guests know what they're doing. You know, Hilton have their clean stay, and we have to put labels on bedroom doors. That's not something we're doing with other brands, but certainly it's something that they like. And we've always provided clean, health and safe environment for people to come and stay. And whilst we have looked at how we clean differently and how we actually demonstrate to the guests that they've got clean hotels to come and stay in, it is really something that we've always been doing as hoteliers. So I don't see that has changed a huge amount. Part of it is really just letting the guests know that their well-being is most important. As Amanda was just saying, that you know, it has become a real focus.
Mm-hmm. And off the back of that then, Paul, what are your thoughts on guest expectations of COVID compliant stays? You touched on, you know, Hilton, they have their idea of what they believe guests are going to be looking for. What's your personal view? Are we going to see housekeeping more visible, for example?
So I don't think people want to see a clean room. They quite like seeing somebody wandering around with the duster, and that makes them feel a little bit comforting that there's somebody in the hotel that's cleaning all the time, but it's not a prerequisite. They want to make sure that guests want to make sure that we're complying with, you know, whether it's a 2-meter rule at the moment or a 1-meter rule, or as it was in the summer. And as I said earlier, they want to make sure that the rooms are clean, and maybe they haven't been in. Nobody's been in them since they were cleaned. Comments from Gordon. Our main housekeeping company actually uses deionized water rather than cleaning chemicals, and that's something that we've been speaking a lot about recently. We use automated hoovering, which, you know, makes housekeepers more efficient as well. And then food and beverage, and what Amanda was saying as well, you know, even in a select service or limited service hotel, we're having to deliver food to rooms, which is not something that is expected in a 3-star or limited service hotel, but to remain COVID compliant is what we want to do. But we've had to provide good food, wholesome food. Typically we're serving workers who can't go to a cafe and have a breakfast before they go to work, so they're relying on us providing a decent breakfast, and that's the one part that's been really tough for us to get guests to engage in. And when we're looking at scores, then yeah, breakfast is scoring worse on anything, because people still like to have, and I think they will still come back to wanting to sit in a restaurant, wanting to have a buffet breakfast.
Mm-hmm. Kind of touches on what Deborah was saying earlier about different roles and responsibilities, and whether we're going to see perhaps a different way of operating, whether, you know, we are going to see roles and responsibilities broadened out to accommodate to all these different changes. And speaking about changes, Deborah, I'd like to come to you next, please, because I'd like to perhaps put it into perspective. What role has certification played during the pandemic, and where are we at right now?
I think times are very different now than they were last year as we reopened in July, I think, especially in the UK. Sorry, Amanda. But there is something, I coined a phrase and I wish it would take up, but the rise and rise of clean washing. There's so much marketing speak out there that is literally around saying we're doing all of this, but actually not doing it, if that makes sense. So I stayed at a global brand last November and was actually left quite scared. Oh no, it must have been October, sorry, because we were back in lockdown. But I was actually quite scared to see a sleeve on a remote control that said it was sanitized, but it was actually really dirty, and my eyesight isn't the best in the world anyway, but I could see the dirt on this remote control. And that's what worries me about words. Does that make sense? That it's people using marketing speak rather than genuine processes and procedures. going on from that, I mean, our government, obviously in the UK, we had Good to Go scheme, the AA have done the COVID-19 scheme. And as self-certifications go, they're fine, but actually, like any self-certification, it is marking your own homework. There's no evidence to it, there's no support for it. And then it attracts the bad actors. And we should be honest, as an industry, we have some bad actors. Which Magazine and ITN have taken this up, and they've really looked at them. I don't mean to name and shame, but there are brands that were absolutely pulled out as not doing half the things they should be doing. So I think now it's time for people to take it seriously, to really understand that it's not going away. We are changing properly forever. And actually what they do need and what the customers want is a third-party check. You know, our accreditation means they upload their insurance certificate, they upload their COVID-19, their cleaning, their protocols, their fire certificates. You have all of that in place. It just needs to be more robust to protect consumers. Otherwise, our industry is going to be damaged by those people at the bottom end of the market, abusing the system, basically.
So do you believe then that the hype of certification plays a role in rebuilding confidence? Maybe let's broaden that out to the role of transparency. How transparent do we have to be to rebuild that confidence?
I think the best operators, or those operating at the level they should be, won't be frightened of that transparency will be because they've done everything they need to do, they've checked everything they should be checking, and they're constantly reviewing and updating it. We're in a world of continuous improvement. We have been, COVID or not, we've been in that place for a long time now. And I think what we need to do is differentiate the products for the sake of the consumer. So they're not just looking at a stamp, because most of them believe that actually somebody is going round and checking, that there is somebody at government level that comes and does all of this. And we all know that an EHO probably goes once every 3 years these days. There just isn't the manpower there to do it. So we're confusing the market with tick box exercises, and that needs to stop. And actually now everybody needs to get on the boat with the whole quality aspect and really embedding practices to protect the industry as much as anything else.
Thanks, Deborah. And again, building from what we've all just been talking about, Gordon, I'm going to come to you next, please, because you highlighted there's been so many different various approaches to these cleaning regimes, though I think it's safe to say that the majority of hotels or even other hospitality venues and businesses, they've adopted tech. And I want to ask, what is the return on investment on this type of equipment? I know we have a question here in the chats from Stephen Lardner about luxury hotels actually embracing technology around the customer bed. Could you please perhaps answer that question with reference to Stephen's question in the Q&A?
Yeah, well, to me, there's two sides of technology. There's the IT technology, which a lot of people are adopting in hotels, from the touchless check-ins, that type of thing. I think that's one thing that is a good thing and was going to come no matter whether it was a pandemic or not. With regards to technology that we install and to the question that you're asking about pillows, we even have pillows in our technology which are protected, which are antimicrobial permanently. Not like some of the products out there that only last for a month or so. We protect surfaces continuously and the air continuously. So there's lots of technology. And then back to Deborah's point in case as well about, and your point as well, Eloise, about all the different methods. I'm aware of one global brand, won't mention names, but they're part owned by the bleach company, so they're going to use their technology to do it their way. And yeah, self-certification should be dismissed. As far back as last summer, where we had COVID Secure. Now, COVID Secure being adopted by so many people on radio stations, TV stations, and people saying they're COVID Secure, that's simply having a risk assessment to have 2 metre distancing and having hand gel. That doesn't make your premises COVID secure. That just means you've ticked some boxes. And then you've got all and this is not a hospitality bashing exercise. We're talking about every environment. They all have their own little certification schemes. They're all self-certified. That just does not make sense. We certify our procedure and give guests peace of mind that when Room to Breathe has been installed, this is what you expect, and this is what we do on every 4-month period to recertify rooms or office spaces or whatever. So that's an external certification, but that's not us controlling the housekeeping or the cleaners in between. But it's, again, we'll go back to education, awareness, understand first of all how the pandemic has been working, what risks you have, and the simple measures to mitigate that, and then educate your guest and tell them what you're doing in a calm manner, certify and give them peace of mind. I kind of disagree on being more visual with cleaners, because the cleaners is only as good as they are. Because they carry a cloth and a bottle of disinfectant doesn't mean that they're doing anything with it. So tech can be both things, both IT and the new technology that hopefully we bring to the hospitality providers.
I'd like to, I've had a question come in from Alexandra about the use of ozone machines. I have to throw my hands up and say that I wouldn't actually know what these are, but Gordon, I think you are well placed to answer that question, but I'm going to tie it in. I know that you've replied to Martin's question as well in the chat, but obviously there's going to be people who are going to receive a copy of this recording afterwards. And Martin asks whether we can create an industrial standard for client safety, for example, ultraviolet C blue light certification for both water and dry areas such as hotel rooms, air conditioning, etc. Could you please pick that up, Gordon?
Try and be as concise as I can with all of those points. Ozone machines, they certainly do what they say on the tin, but it's a short, immediate action. You need to vacate a room for a period of time. And I am aware of some machines that recirculate or retract the ozone from the air and neutralise it. But then again, you need to vent the air after you've used the ozone machine, but it's only for that moment in time. As regards to having standards, I think buildings and properties are so diverse. Even within one building, you could have different elevations on a hotel that has different environmental issues. One could be south facing, north facing, one could be continual in sunlight. These all have impacts on indoor air quality and issues. So to have a standard that fits all premises across the world or even a country is impossible. It's impossible from an indoor air quality point of view. Therefore, it's impossible from a hotel or hospitality point of view to try and get an industry-wide standard. I think it's, yeah.
And if you could offer advice about how to reduce risk, what would that be, Gordon?
Other than install Room to Breathe or our products. Reducing risk it's about education. Again, education. If everyone understands how the virus transmits, that it's more than 95% is via the air. So the government legislation and advice for the whole year worldwide has been about cleaning. It's absolutely no good. It's been your surfaces are clean for that moment in time. So install our BioTouch, protects your surfaces 24/7 continuously. Install our air sanifiers continuously, monitors your air. And then we've got pillows, duvets, mattresses, all which prevent bed bugs to viruses, to bacteria, to molds, even VOCs, cleaning chemicals. These are all things that impact on a guest's quality of stay. To Amanda, in the luxury environment, there's people are becoming aware, and perhaps back to a question you asked earlier, who's going to drive this? I think the public will drive it. It won't come from the provider. The public are becoming more and more aware of what they are entitled to in indoor air quality. A year ago in the Western world, personally, I suppose, but I was laughed at about viruses. Why do we need to worry about viruses? So we need to protect from the next COVID, from the next outbreak. And back to Deborah again, is at least do as much as you can to mitigate. You don't need to have extra housekeeping staff. You just need to make sure that you have protocols in place And perhaps one of the most important things which is being missed worldwide, it's not about opening up, it's about staying open. It's about what do you do once you have an outbreak? Because unfortunately, some of us will experience someone having COVID or something else. What do you do so that your staff don't panic, your other guests don't panic? What have you in place? And again, Room to Breathe can provide that. And we can provide other protocols and you know, systems, but don't focus on just opening up, because we will get caught out with what do you do when there's an outbreak. And it's not just COVID, because someone has a cold, a flu, a cough amongst staff. Do you send them home? Do you send the rest of the staff home? You know, what are we going to do? Have something in place that reduces risk continuously, not just reacting with a bucket of water and a dirty cloth.
Thanks, Gordon. And almost on the same topic, but a slightly different angle here about reducing and mitigating risk, I'm going to come to Paul. You recently, one of your hotels recently had a fire. For those in the audience that might not know, I will obviously hand over to you to explain, Paul, what happened. But can you talk us through some of the fire safety standards that you had in place that effectively mitigated risk?
So very unfortunately, we had an electrical fault in Ibis Hotel in Gatwick just over a month ago. This caused a small fire in a storeroom. It set the fire alarms off. It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The hotel wasn't busy anyway. The team went up to the 5th floor where the fire was. They saw the smoke coming from underneath the fire door, realized it wasn't a false alarm, successfully evacuated the building very, very quickly. And we're very grateful that they did. Nobody was hurt, nobody was injured. And they've called the fire brigade, and it was then for the fire brigade to deal with, and they dealt with it superbly by pumping 30,000 litres of water through the roof. And so we've now got a complete 144 bedroom hotel, which is completely ruined, predominantly through water and smoke damage. But again, everybody was safe. And it brought home to me and to the whole team the importance. You know, I've been installing fire doors in hotels since the late 80s, and fire alarm systems and ventilated lobbies and smoke detectors and all the things that we now take for granted when we go to a hotel. But it really did bring it home to me when I walked through a completely burnt out corridor, and then I opened the fire door into a bedroom, and the bedroom looked as if somebody could go and sleep in it straight away. It was really quite remarkable. And you know, we build hotels as well. We don't just buy trading hotels, we build ground up hotels. We work with our architects who understand the brand standards or the standards required, the fire life safety standards required. We work with different brands. Different brands have different views on fire life safety standards. Some of the American brands try and increase the fire life safety standards that are required here anyway, but we'd like to think that we build safe hotels and we operate safe hotels, and it's events like this which show how important it is. Sadly, there have been some other quite high profile fires recently where you know, the hotels were completely destroyed, or sadly there'd been loss of life. And it's about maintaining fire standards and fire systems and making sure that things installed correctly in the first place. There's an awful lot of education you can get out of an event like this. And I actually invited people to come down and have a look at the hotel, and we had a number of people come down. Development directors of hotel companies came down and had a look to see how the hotel performed in a fire. And yeah, I was thrilled if that enables one person to go back and make some changes to the design of how they're going to build their next hotel, or what refurbishment plans they're going to put in the next time they refurbish a hotel, then it's been worthwhile. But yeah,
I think what you did there was such a great initiative. Someone once said to me during the pandemic that the need to know has become the need to share. And you opening up your doors essentially and sharing your experiences and inviting people to come and have a look, no doubt was probably an eye-opener to other people.
Well, it was, I suppose I got the idea from the fire brigade, who the day after the fire had got fire engines full of young firemen and fire ladies in the building, walking around showing them what had happened, how they dealt with the fire and what they would do differently and what they would do next. And I thought, well, there's no reason why can't we learn in the same way? Other things which were kicked in were things like we work with a company called Shield, so a little bit like Gordon, so I think it was Amanda's comments earlier on, our fire life safety standards, everything was loaded up on there. The last time the fire alarm was inspected was loaded into Shield, which is a cloud-based system. And so we could very quickly demonstrate that everything had been inspected recently, it was all working very well before the fire occurred. And so all these little pieces that we put in place at the time might seem like an inconvenience, but when something like this happens, it's so important that you can actually pull off the information efficiently and quickly. And as I said earlier on, the important thing is that nobody got hurt.
Yeah, that was, thankfully, everyone was absolutely fine. And I'd like to finish up with you, Paul, by asking whether you think that the insurance burden on operators, going back to the past 12 months, will that burden on operators likely change as a result of the pandemic?
Well, I think insurance policies will change. It's been a real minefield, hasn't it, of business interruption policies, and we've seen the Supreme Court ruling as to what insurance companies and what insurance policies will have to pay out. You had those which were people who were covered for pandemics, and Wimbledon, All England Tennis and Croquet Club was one of them, I believe. And then you've got people who thought they were covered for a business interruption, only to find that they never were covered. And so I think that will change, and I think people will be more aware of what to ask their insurance brokers when they're renewing as to, and also I think if people want pandemic cover going forwards, then that's going to be highly expensive. We've obviously got a business interruption claim as part of the fire, which I know is separate, and quite rightly our insurance company is saying, well, you were quiet anyway, you weren't closed, we were open to key workers, but you weren't 90% occupied as you normally are in Gatwick. And so that's an ongoing debate with them as to agreeing what is a fair business interruption claim. And there we're working with an insurance loss assessor to act on our behalf, where when you're dealing with such a large claim, potential claim, then it's, to my mind, has become so important to have somebody who understands the industry that's acting in our best interest as well. And I would say the same even with the COVID business interruption. If you really believe you've got a claim, don't listen to your broker, don't listen to the loss adjuster. They are their interests are the same as the insurance companies, and their interests are to not pay out if they can afford to do so, or if they can find any way of doing so. If you really believe your wording is correct and you have the ability to claim, go to a reputable loss assessor and ask them to look at that for you. There are lawyers out there who are on a no-win, no-fee basis, and it can be quite expensive, and you need to be really, really careful on that. But certainly, as we've been to a loss assessor, and again, they're advising us on that side as well as the fire.
Well, best of luck to you, Paul. I do hope that it goes somewhat smoothly in the best of circumstances. So,
thank you.
So welcome.
I'm sure it will. I'm sure it will. And now we're dealing with a building site, and it was probably going to take us 18 months to strip the building out and refurbish it and open it up again. So we look forward to when that opens as a nice shiny new ibis at some point in the not too distant future.
We'll be reopening in an entirely new landscape.
Won't we just?
And I'd like to bring our conversation to an almost close by finishing with Amanda here. On the topic of insurance, I wondered whether Forbes Travel Guide considers the provision of insurance, for example, medical cover, by a hotel in its rankings. I have seen the odd story of certain hotels offering, for example, complimentary medical cover. I'm curious to see whether, whether Forbes Travel Guide considers this.
Thank you, Eloise. Actually, we currently don't. That's not something that we look at in Forbes Travel Guide standards, but I want to kind of maybe tie some of the last points together that Deborah and Gordon and Paul made. And Gordon, you made a great point earlier on in response to Eloise's question about the self-certification and the integrity concern behind that. And, when we use our standards to evaluate for a star rating and to determine if a property is earned a recommended 4 or 5, we send somebody in person, incognito, from the moment of reservation to the moment of departure, to verify that process and ensure that the standards that we're looking for are in place. And we've been doing that for, decades now. One of the great things about our company that I love is our owner, Jeff Arnold, also owns a digital healthcare company and ShareCare. And one of the things that we partnered with our sister company on over the pandemic and continue to partner with them on is the launch of a self-verification tool to verify hotels are following safety and compliance. This is everything from health and hygiene to cleaning, masks, ventilation, and management accountability. And much like our standards for service and facility that we use for the star ratings, we never say you must service, you must provide service in a particular way, or you must provide this product, or you must use this company or this brand. We're just looking for the end user experience to be present. And the same is true of our our ShareCare verified with Forbes Travel Guide system. So what our self-verification tool does with technology that in a very sophisticated way also corroborates that what the hotel says that they have in place is there through technology and proof that those things are happening is, we don't say, for example, you must use Gordon Bruce's brand, but we do want to know, if you're using products that enhance that element of health safety and prove to us what you're using. And in that case, they might prove their connection with the use of something like Gordon's product. So, when it comes to self-verification, we agree 100%. It's not a checklist. You can't kind of goof your way through it and just say you're doing certain things, because companies like ours and like our sister company are there verifying that these things are happening, because what's important to us and all of us at the end of the day is that we're all supporting that confidence to get people back into hotels, into restaurants, into spas, to keep those places open. Our system is an ongoing system. It has been, it's annual and always will be. And, at the end of the day, it's also about helping the travel agents as well, because those are the ones that push a lot of this business to these hotels, and giving them a tool with which, through our tool, they can use to determine where they're going to send their customers. It's really important at the end of the day, if they're following health safety protocols wherever they are in the world, you need some moniker that shows that you are. That's how our star rating system has worked over the years. Many of these 5-star hotels were doing a lot of the things that we look for long before perhaps we came along. However, what we're there for is to corroborate independently and with integrity that this is what you can expect, and it's a guarantee. So that's what we're doing to help support some of the touch points that my co-panelists brought up on the call.
Thanks, Amanda. I've actually got a question here from Graham, which I think is worth bringing to you. In terms of Forbes standards, how far ahead of Europe and the US are countries like Singapore, Taiwan, and South Korea. And what lessons can the luxury hospitality industry learn as hospitality venues in these areas begin to start opening up?
You know, we're seeing a lot of up and down when it comes to recovery. You know, at one point, Asia was ahead, and then there was a bit of a setback, and then at one point it looked like Europe was going to forge ahead, and now it's not. And, you know, and here in the States, we've got some really strong positive opening signs, and, you know, like I said before, properties that never even closed. So it's all changing, and, you know, even every time we have our weekly meetings, it's changing. You know, I think at the end of the day, everybody is just trying to still figure out the best thing to do. And, you know, when you've got brands that are out there offering support and services like ours and like Gordon's, and, you know, I know Deborah's company does the same thing, it's important to embrace that, because we're all in this together. And I know that was a slogan in the UK, but we say it a lot here too. And we're all here to support getting the world traveling again, but safely. And I can't remember who said it, but education and communication about what you've learned as an industry to the consumer, to the guest, is super important. Not over communicating. We're seeing a lot of that, and it's really overwhelming for the guest, but striking that right balance of when it goes out and what it says and what your brand does.
Deborah?
I was just going to add this lovely picture I've got behind me of Hong Kong. These guys are actually really good. What they've learned through SARS, I think, can really help us in terms of where there's outbreaks. And we should be studying them in terms of how they operate it if they have an outbreak in the hotel, what they did at the time, what they do to then they isolate people on site, and all of those things. There are some lessons definitely to be learned around the way that Asia dealt with SARS in the past, I think.
They're in a much stronger lockdown situation again now. I don't think the borders are even fully reopened with Macau. So I think this, yeah, definitely.
I can just throw in as well, one of our consultants actually advised Singapore government on the SARS outbreak. So we're here to help.
I definitely go back to my point, is that there clearly is very much still to learn. And we are just going to continuously try and learn and make it through. But we have very fast approached our 1 hour webinar. Honestly, sometimes I just get shocked by how quickly the time flies. So I want to say thank you to everyone who has submitted their questions. And as I mentioned earlier, the LinkedIn profiles of all the Trailblazers have been posted into the chat, so please do connect with these guys in your own time and carry on the conversation. So before I return, because of the early May bank holiday, I'll be back in 3 weeks' time as opposed to 2, for a session on slicing and dicing your hotel inventory. It's going to be Monday, May the 10th at 2 o'clock BST. And you will hear more from me in the run-up to this webinar across the websites. And as I mentioned earlier, Urban Living Festival is taking place this summer on the 7th and 8th of July at Tobacco Dock in London, and we can't wait to see you guys there in person. It could be one of the first events back for the industry, and if you would like to hear more about ULF, please get in touch with my colleague Katie. Her details are up now on your screen, and I believe her LinkedIn is being posted in the chat. Thanks, guys. And that brings us to a close. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and a huge thank you to our Trailblazers for sharing your thoughts, opinions, insights, experiences. I really appreciate it. And that is a wrap from me. So please do take care, and I will see you all back here in 3 weeks' time.
Thank you.